Hi, I'm Geeta Subramaniam-Mooney and I'm Newham's Children and Young People's Commissioner. This is the first role of its kind in local government, and it's really important in terms of ensuring that we all play a role in making sure that young people are safe and that they are able to meet their potential and absolutely have all of the opportunities that they need to thrive. As part of the thinking around youth safety, I have developed this whole systems approach through illustration. And the concept is really to try and help us all to think about what more we can do and how we can be more involved in ensuring that all of our young people are safe. So this whole systems approach really is predicated on a public health thinking model, and it's very much about making sure that at every point of a child's journey that we are thinking about what we can all do, how we can contribute, and how we make the borough a safer place. We always think about young people in this concept, because if we don't think about them with potential and think about what opportunities and what positive things that they bring to society, we will never be able to think differently about young people who are accessing services but may also be at risk and at harm. Part of the work of the youth safety agenda is to ensure that we think about the different aspects of prevention. So if we start with heart disease, we all know that primary prevention of heart disease is through making sure we have good diet and exercise. But what does that look like in terms of youth safety? Well, fundamentally, we know that having the best start in life and solid foundations for our children are always beginning through our education. But it's not just through English and maths, it's about how do young people feel that they can have critical thinking, that they can learn about well-being and making sure that they feel supported. But also importantly is about a neighbourhood that feels safe, a neighbourhood that has trusted adults and that have families and communities that can really support young people through difficulties at any point in their life. If we move along then to secondary prevention, and we know through heart disease that if you have high blood pressure, you are often medicated for it. What does that look like in terms of youth safety? Well, there's huge amounts of evidence that say that we know that young people who are living and growing up in families where there are adverse childhood experiences, that their trajectory in life is often really detrimental. But that doesn't mean that's something we can't change, and we can always modify adversity. So the adverse childhood experiences can be families or parents who have mental health or substance misuse, or maybe in prison, or domestic abuse. And what that means is that the trauma impacted on our children's brains is significant, and often they are in a hypervigilant state of fight, flight or freeze. That's really difficult for young people because often what that leads to are these dynamic flags that could be triggers for when young people are getting involved in some difficult situations. And these are often things, as you can see, like labels that we apply, where we name, shame and blame children instead of starting to think about the behaviour that they are displaying, maybe trying to communicate something to us. If we move along then in terms of heart disease, often when you have a heart attack, we are trying to prevent further heart attacks. And in terms of youth safety, what that critically means is that we need to understand where our young people are most at risk and what are those trigger events. We know that the aspects of being involved in county lines or gangs or online difficulty or being exploited through other means are really tricky situations for young people to navigate. And we also know that often young people are riding through this escalator at speed. And so our role is very much to try and help them to come back down that escalator. But we know that when children are walking down escalators that are coming up, it's very difficult. And so it often seems like we're not meeting their needs, but it's not an easy ask. Finally, I think it's sad to say, of course, with heart disease, as it is with youth safety, that when we get to a situation of critical management, often those injuries are life-changing, life-threatening, or sadly sometimes end up in death. And so our role collectively is to ensure that we do not get into that situation and that everything that we do is about prevention and to make sure that we bring young people down the escalator and down those steps so that they can meet their full potential. I think it's important to say that whilst we're describing a whole system, there are complexities and they are interconnected with a number of things. And of course, what we're trying to do is to minimise risk and harm to our young people. And we're trying to make sure that through every part of the intervention, we hold at the core young people, and that we don't name them, label them, or that we don't think of them in terms of offenders and perpetrators. And very much in what we're describing here is that none of these things are a fait accompli. We can absolutely modify any of these adversities. We can use a trauma-informed response and a restorative language which helps us to reshape, reframe, and to really think about the positive narrative for young people. Illustrating our thinking is often a really important way of us trying to reframe the narrative, and illustrations of this kind I have found to really help others and a whole range of partners and young people and parents to try and understand why we do what we do. It's really easy for us to get into sort of medical language and talk about evidence-based practice, which of course is really important. But an illustration like this hopefully starts to get us to think differently, to behave differently, and hopefully we can keep referring back to these illustrations to think again about what more we can do. So in terms of a whole systems response to youth safety, as I've said, there is a lot of evidence already about what works. And the roots, if we think about the roots of a tree, they are absolutely critical foundations about the evidence that we know will help and work with young people. So what you see here is some of those kind of key elements of nurture, of attachment, really thinking about love, because we know that young people do need those basic needs met, and when they don't have those needs met, they have difficulties in trying to understand empathy or to build relationships with others. We also know that valuing diversity of thought, and particularly in terms of diversity of London, but also in terms of the range of people that we need to come together with different perspectives to really make a difference. There's also huge evidence about play and learn. We play with 3-year-olds when they're learning to teach them how to read and how to handle objects, but we certainly don't use the same perspectives and play when we're talking to 13 and 14-year-olds. Yet we know that play and learn will really help young people in terms of their ability to navigate the world, to critically think, and also to thrive as individuals and into adulthood. What we're describing here next is very much about the seeds that we all need to sow. And if we can all agree on the evidence base and to think about in our approaches how we do that, we then start to grow. We grow that tree together. And the tree is so important because if we're all surrounding the tree and we're all holding our hands together, we really can make the biggest difference. So what you'll see in the branches of this tree is an awful lot of descriptions, but what I will focus on are some really critical languages that we need to start to think about. When I use the word restorative, we're talking about trying to re-engage and to manage conflict, but that's conflict between ourselves, with each other, with young people. How do we try and ensure young people understand how to deal with conflict through our words? But also, how do we make sure that if this is not about blaming and shaming and naming parents or children or partners, we all need to be in a language that's about helping and supporting young people. What you'll see here is very much around how we can make sure that the empathy is part of our thinking and our principles. And we know that that's not just about knowing what that feels like for young people, but it's really about making sure that whenever we're delivering services, whatever it is that we're talking about, that we are doing it through the voice and the lived experiences of young people and families. What you'll see next is very much what I think is important around that front-facing visibility of young people. Often we see young people with negativity. We see them as possibly difficult, dangerous, up to no good. We cannot and should not be judging young people in that way, and we absolutely have to stop that negative narrative. Our children are our future, and if we do not invest in them and if we do not keep them safe and give them the skills to be productive adults, we are not doing anybody any good. As you move around, I really think it's important that we stop using that language of dangerous or gangs or scary young people. This is all about protection and safety, and we need to really start to think about how we talk about the issues that are affecting our young people. We must think about well-being. We are all there to hold and support young people. As adults, we have an important role to protect our young people. And so we need to do that through our words, the way in which we act, and of course, in the way in which we deliver services and support them. And finally, through this last bit of the branch of the tree, I think it's really easy to focus on the things that worry us and the things that our young people are involved in that are quite frightening. But if we can do all of these other things in the tree, we will minimise those risks and harms to our young people. Finally, in terms of the philosophy, as I've said, if we don't grow those roots and that tree together, if we do not all face the same direction and have the same philosophy, when we take a step forward, we won't be moving forward together. And it's so important that we change our language, we agree a philosophy, and that we really focus on the potential of each and every child, each and every day, because this is our future and this is our role as adults in this community to make a difference.